which was in around 2000, you could not start intermediate until you could stand up from Urdhva Dhanurasana. So you had to learn to stand up. And then you were given intermediate. Until you could stand up, no intermediate. So I remember with Shankara, my son, he got up in any way he could. You know, it looked horrible, but he stood up. So then he got intermediate series. I had another student from France who was concerned about alignment and would never lose his alignment, so he could never stand up because of the alignment. And so I suggested to him, I said, don't worry about alignment, just stand up, you'll get the postures. Then you can come back to alignment. I'm not sure what it is now. I think you have to reach back around your ankles or you have to drop back. I'm not sure what it is before you get an intermediate. When we learned, we didn't have Urdhva Dhanurasana after primary series. We didn't have Urdhva Dhanurasana after intermediate series. We learned Urdhva Dhanurasana, the last back bend, after we had started doing advanced postures. So there was none of us having to be able to stand up before you were given intermediate. The system was then that you came in, and what people did in those days was when we decided to go to Mysore, people who went to Mysore committed to 3 months in Mysore. Very few people came, unless they were already given the series. Very few people came for 1 month. It was always 3 months. And so as a beginner, it didn't matter who you were. Primary series was learnt within those 3 months. So Guruji would put you into postures if you couldn't do them. He was the prop. And so everybody learned, and then we progressed into intermediate. No waiting period. You know, like I said, it took me 3 months to learn primary series. I then took a month holiday because my body was so sore. I was beaten up, and I went for a holiday around India, traveled around India, and my body healed. And then I came back, and then Joanne did not release. Joanne stayed there. And at that time, we were not a couple, but we arrived 1 week apart. So we were pretty much always taught the same things at the same time. And so then Guruji had me catch up to her very quickly. And so it took me 2 months to learn intermediate, and took Joanne 3 months or so. The progression was very quick in those days, no long waits. And then looking at the Yoga Sutra, which is the, you know, for me, the Bible of yoga, the yoga practice. And Yoga Sutras, it has very little to do with yoga postures. It talks about yoga posture as being stable and steady and connected. And says then once we have that, then we have the ability to look inside. We have a chance to look at the universe, and which means we have a look at chi or prana. We can observe it moving in our body. And of course, this prana is the same around the universe, but it's within us also. And we can observe it. So we can start to observe the movement. And the way we see it is with a sense of touch. So we're looking inside with a sense of touch, and it comes as movement. So if we're breathing and we want to move somewhere and it's tight, that's telling us there's a blockage, and that means prana has stopped. So we want to open it up. We want to be able to find these places where we're free to let the prana flow. So this is the yoga posture of asana, is opening the body so prana moves. And to tell you how deep you need to go into the process of sitting and having this posture correct is that it has to do with the mind. It becomes so deeply involved in this practice and observing that we have the ability to move into pratyahara, which is the losing of our senses. So we don't have senses. So what they say, if someone pours hot water on you, you won't feel it. Okay, so this is to me was very hard to understand. I didn't believe it. I said, what's this? I would, if someone pours hot water on me, I'm going to feel it. But if you're so deeply involved, and with pratyahara, if someone poured hot water on you, you would not feel because you're away from your body. So it's pretty deep way to go. So he's talking very deeply on the subject of what asana is. I also spoke to, this was my teacher, Shailendra Sharma, and I spoke to him about this, and that's when he explained it to me. And I went, oh, okay, I have a lot of understanding to do. And so then I would ask me about, what about doing yoga postures? This is not it, sitting, meditation, but what about yoga postures? And I kept going on. He said, yes, okay, these feelings that you have should also be in a yoga posture. So that's what we're trying to achieve in a yoga posture, whether it's a back bend, forward bend. We want to be so deep that we go into the pratyahara and we lose the ability of, lose the pairs of opposites, which is also emotional. So a lot of the opposites we have are love and hate and likes, dislikes. We become very neutral. So this is where we need to go. And so in doing asana, if we look at it that way, there's not a great deal of importance in what we're doing in the yoga postures. It doesn't matter how deep we can go into a back bend. In fact, many people go too deep into a back bend and are causing all these problems. So we want to go into a posture where we're comfortable and connected. And going too deep, we sometimes lose that. The way we can first see it, if we're going too deep, is first pain. Pain would be one thing. The other thing is the breathing. So if we're struggling and our breath becomes hard, it means we've gone too far. Our breath is telling us, hey, back off a little bit, allow yourselves to breathe. So that's where we're going to try and come to. The same with the legs. I have quite a few students, but when I teach this every time I teach the class. The first movement after samastiti that I ask people to do is bend the legs, lift the heels and reach up. Bend, lift, reach. And so the reaching is extending. We're reaching away. Much like the way Groucho Marx used to walk. If you remember Groucho Marx, I don't know if any of you do. He's pretty old. But this lengthening then means the muscles are actually lengthening and connecting. And you will feel when you do this, the quadriceps engage, the kneecaps lift, but also the muscles in the back of the legs work. And you also connect to the lower abdomen, which is the dantian, or the kanda, in Sanskrit kanda, and allows us to lengthen and connect to middle dantian. So all these connections come from here, and yet the muscles are lengthening, and yet we're very solid, but with movement. So many people are told, which was, I don't know if it's told anymore, but when I first started learning yoga, everybody was told to pull up the quadriceps, pull up the kneecaps. And from this instruction, many people ended up by jamming and locking the knees, and then knee problems occurred. And I would teach people this, and then I realized that many people are working this muscle, the calf muscle. They're coming into the calf muscle, and even though they were lifting the heels, and when they lowered down, they went, and the calf muscles would be so tight that that would tighten the rest of the body. And so again, injuries occurred because of these problems, these way of working the muscles. So this is, if we want to look at modifications of our students or ourselves, we have to start looking at how we're engaging our muscles, how we're working. And if we learn to just simply, instead of lifting the arms, lift the fingers,
it can change. It can change. If we just lift the fingers, it becomes very light. If we lift the arms, we use these muscles, and it causes some tightness. And you can try that now if you want. Just sit. You don't have to stand up. You can just sit down, take up one hand, one arm, and lift the fingers. And just in terms of the sound of saying fingers, you lift. But if I say lift the arms, and you do the arms, you feel the muscles change. There's a whole different process and different feeling in the body. So I never tell people to lift their arms. I always say lift your hands, lift your fingers, because I know just hearing arms, the mind will go to arm, and these muscles will work. You say fingers, and it forgets about this. Even though they work in a different. What I've been working on very much in my practice these days is drishti. And what I've kind of worked out and found the easiest way to describe drishti is the way Patabi Joyce described it in Yoga Mala. In yoga, he doesn't say much about drishti, but there's one thing that he does say: odd numbers look up, even numbers look down. So this is in Surya Namaskar. And if we keep that principle, that if we're coming into ekam, the drishti is the hands. And so if we look at the hands, not when we're up in the air and then look up, we look at the hands from the beginning of the movement. So we take our eyes out peripherally and just follow the hands up. And when we bring the hands down, we follow the hands down. Then the eyes will follow, and the body will follow this movement of the eyes. So this is important, that you follow the hands up, follow it down. So if we're doing upward facing dog, we should be following the hands up and following the hands down as we go into downward facing dog. So we don't have the ability to lift the hands because we're on the floor supporting us. So we have to pretend we're a god like Ganesh and have 4 arms. And so we imagine now 2 extra arms are going up as if we're doing Ekam and Samastiti. So we're coming here and there, the arm is going up. So the same thing, we're coming up, following the hand, up and down. So if you can understand the drishti is, the drishti is not just in when we're in the posture looking somewhere. The drishti is most important in the transitions into postures and out of postures. I think it's the most important part of the drishti.